All right. If you want to open up to Isaiah chapter 63, Isaiah 63. Isaiah 62 was about Zion salvation coming. 64 is now about the day of the Lord's vengeance. This is very graphic. It starts right away with this imagery that we're going to see um, about the Lord coming. And it turns into a prayer, kind of a reminder of their own history and their historical reference of where they have come from themselves. And so in this chapter, we see judgment, mercy, and a prayer. That God alone is the judge. He's the one that has a right to judge, establish the standard. He's the one that redeems. There's nobody else that has the capability to redeem. And he uses that in showing the difference that there's nobody that could save us, around. And that's true as a Christian, isn't it? I mean, nobody could save us. This is applying, of course, to Israel. And by the way, we're getting really close to the end of Isaiah. And so I was looking, and I think what we're going to do is when we finish, we only got a couple more chapters, we're going to move to Jeremiah and then go through Daniel and then Ezekiel. Of course, that's a long time. But that's kind of my mapping for our Sunday afternoon classes because historically, Isaiah is prophesying into the future, and then we see Jeremiah lives it out and sees it happening. And then, of course, Daniel overlaps Jeremiah because he is then taken off into captivity and lives in captivity. And then Ezekiel is one who is in captivity, born in captivity, and prophesies some more. But Ezekiel is probably one of the toughest ones that I've ever taught, but it's also exciting. But I've loved Isaiah. Isaiah has so many applications, so many references to it. And this chapter is one I think is exciting too because of the way that Isaiah is using the imagery to show concepts about God. And this is one of those things I say it a lot. If you don't read the prophets and you're not familiar with the language in which he uses, and we're going to dive right into some of that, then you don't understand Revelation. Don't go swim in that water if you haven't, in other words, stay in the kiddie pool because there's language that people have taken from Revelation and they have no idea how it's been used, how God uses it. It's like taking somebody from the South that uses Southern language and terminology and going to the North and trying to talk to somebody up there, and they just assume what it means. If you don't know how people talk in the South and use that sort of language, what's a holler? Anybody know? It's a valley. We call those arroyos out here. So if I was to keep saying, y'all need to go to the holler, you'd look at me like, oh, holler, what's a holler? Oh, louder? That's what I'm talking about. And so in this tonight, I'm going to I try to bring that up because so many people want to go to Revelation. They want to go to Revelation, but they don't see some of the language. And some of that language we're going to see tonight that's used in Revelation. And so then you go, wow, okay, I understand it. So coming back to this just chapter, we see that, like I said, God alone judges, and he's the only one that can redeem. And then we're going to see the talk about the people remember his mercy. And it's interesting because you get a little lost because it sounds like he's talking in the third person, but like how is he placing this? Who did who, what to who? And we'll kind of clear that up because it's kind of a reminder of themselves. It's like self-talk. Isaiah shifts when he starts having this memory of kind of self-talk, what we've done to ourselves. But that God has not forgotten. God has always remembered his people and his covenant. And even as Christians, sometimes, we feel that way. We feel, that what have I done? Where's God at? We have the same type of thoughts as well. And then we see the people pleading for his help. And then remember, this is historically before they ever go off to captivity. And so there's a lot about Isaiah that the people, as they listen to Isaiah preach these lessons, sitting there going, what? Who are the Babylonians? It's the Assyrians that are the big boys on the block. The Babylonians, we don't even know who they are yet. Wait, yeah, it's that little spot down there by, the Persian Gulf area, but it wouldn't be as meaningful. And that's what I want us to keep in mind. Who are you when you read this? Are you the one that would be sitting there listening to the initial message? Are you the one that now is sitting in captivity listening to this message? Are you the one that's after captivity and gone back home listening to this message? Are you a Christian sitting here today, 2,000 years later, reading this message? So there's those views. And every one of them, what's dynamic and beautiful is they apply. There's different layers of message, the way that God works, that's very fitting and personal to each one of those points of views, those audiences there. So let's jump right into verse 1. It's such a wonderful picture. It's just almost, I don't think Stephen King could draw this up. It's that eerie. It's just kind of this imagery of somebody looking out and seeing this one coming towards him. Listen to verse 1. Who is this that comes from Edom in crimson garments from Bozrah? He is splendid in his apparel, marching in the greatness of his strength. It is I, speaking in righteousness to save the mighty. Why is your apparel red, and your garments is like his who treads in a winepress? I have trodden in the winepress alone, and from peoples who no one has with me. I trod them in my anger and trampled them in my wrath. Their blood life splattered on my garments and stained all my apparel. So it's like there's this conversation, where looking out and seeing there, who is this that's coming from Edom, from that direction? Basra, two different locations, right? So Edom, we know, is a nation. Edom is also, somebody that was an arch enemy of Israel themselves. But he says, that what you have this picture of a wine press, and this is the language I'm talking about, where even later on in Revelation, we'll see this type of an imagery that's being drawn up, which means a judgment has occurred. A judgment has occurred. Those are concepts that are tied to imagery. And this wine press, what's a wine press? Anybody have one at their house? Anybody even gone to see one? Maybe. Have you seen one? I mean, I've gone to California and gone through the vineyards up in there, but I don't know that I've ever gone in the area where they had a wine press. See what I mean? About how, but you understand what it does, right? It takes a fruit, I know I'm being a little oversimple, it's beautiful and precious, and it crushes it to pulverizes it, doesn't it? Just crushes it down. And in that grape pops, and it squirts, and the juice come out of it. And it's different mechanisms of where you can do it. You can either do it by walking and smashing and tromping, right? But it causes that grape to pop, to rupture. And of course, when things pop and rupture, people get dirty, right? I mean, it kind of, if you're wearing whatever you're wearing, don't wear your best. That's what's interesting is here, this person is dressed glorious, right? In in beauty and splendor is in his apparel. And yet in that, he has this image of all this grape juice, or is it, right? All over him. So what did he just do to somebody? He just ran somebody through a wine press and crushed them. And just imagine you're standing there and you see somebody coming towards you that has this beautiful apparel on, but then is splattered. Because, grape juice does look like blood, And so you can imagine seeing what a contradiction. Somebody who was dressed so splendid, but yet then turn around and have all this splatter on them. What happened, right? That's what you'd be wondering. What happened? And he pretty much announces, well, this is what I have done. It's a divine judgment that has come out. Now he's using two locations, and that are very significant, and that is Edom And excuse me, and he's talking about the idea of the Locae Basra, which is a specific capital of Edom. And earlier in Isaiah, he's mentioned specifically this capital city of Edom as a judgment. So it's not something new introduced. But he acts alone as well. He doesn't come with an army, does he? He comes, it's just him. So you just came and you just destroyed this nation? And so he's a warrior who has acted alone, but he says, these stains are not my wounds. I'm fine. I did it all by myself, which tells you his capability is a reflection, right? That he was capable of, carrying out this judgment, this wrath, and yet it's not his. It's somebody else's. And so that press there, that idea, and these people, so he definitely is saying more of a national. Now, we're not looking that this is a specific prophecy against Edom or that capital city he's talking about, but this is representative of the most bitter enemies that Edom was to Israel. And you see other prophets as well talk about the way that Edom had treated them. Now, who was Edom? Well, he's a descendant of Esau. So who was Esau? Well, he was a brother of Jacob. What happened to those brothers? Didn't go so well, did it? Now, there was some reconciliation toward the end, but there was this animosity. They never really reconciled as far as their descendants. And historically, they remained one that were hostile to them. I always like to inject this, but Herod the Great, guess what his descendancy was? He was basically an Edomite. Kind of ironic, isn't it, that Herod the Great, when Jesus came, was actually his loose connection to saying he was a Jewish king. The best he could do was saying that basically he was from the descendants of Esau. And he married a Jew, so that kind of made him authorized to be king. But the Edomites have always had this long, but they were bad. I mean, when Jerusalem was being attacked, Judah was being attacked, it's one thing to be a nation, near a nation being attacked. How do you react? Do you go to their aid? Or do you help attack them? A lot of times it's like, I'm going to be Switzerland on this one, right? We're going to, because you'd be afraid. Or would you want to kiss up to the enemy because you know that they're going to take over anyway and dominate? But if it's your brother, you might want to sit that one out and let that one kind of work itself out. No, Edom jumped in and helped out the Babylonians. And there's some even talk historically how they actually helped round them up. Those who escaped away from the Judeans fleeing away from the captivity, the Edomites round them up and turn them in to the Babylonians. So there's a lot of prophets that talk about how wicked the Edomites were to Israel. So now let's come back to this when we talk about it. So what do they represent? If you're listening to this, this is someone who is one of your worst enemies has just been pulverized. That's a good picture then. This guy that's coming towards you has just taken out one of your worst, bitterest foes. And so that starts to set the stage, doesn't it? And so he says, and in verse 4, for the day of vengeance was in my heart, and the year of redemption had come. I looked, but there was no one to help. I was appalled, but there was no one to uphold. So my own arm brought me salvation, and my wrath upheld me. I trampled down the peoples in my anger. I made them drunk in my wrath. I poured out their lifeblood on the earth. So the redemption does not ignore evil. That's one of the things that even they're experiencing themselves. Yes, God is taking out vengeance on other nations and such, but they're also suffering of their iniquities, aren't they? And they're going to. So that's justice. That is true justice, is the fact that, if you're guilty, you're guilty, and it doesn't matter what it is, you need to suffer the consequences of them. But, God confronts what opposes his purpose, whether it's a violation of the covenant, the people of Israel, or the peoples of the world. And that when he looked around, one of the things he saw, now this could be internal as well, who within them should have stood up and helped them and said, whoa, pump the brakes on this immorality. What are you doing? Get it right. What king stood up and actually kept them on the path of righteousness and covenant faithfulness? There was no man. Nobody did it. So the condition in which he's drawing up is a condition in which they have afflicted themselves, and there's no way out of it. Same way with our sin. Sin has put us in a condition that there's no way out of it. There's nobody who can save us except for one, and that's Jesus Christ. And so that's what he's trying to show. Nobody can replace him. Nobody's going to come up and help you. He's your only rescuer. And his judgment is righteous, and it's not arbitrary. I used to think my parents, everything they did to me was arbitrary. They picked and chose what they punished me about, not my brothers. It's arbitrary. You just got angry and whooped me. That we act like children sometimes. It's like, and I could see the children of Israel sometimes thinking, well, I don't know why he's so upset, why he isn't blessing us and giving us all this. It's like, no. That's the one thing about God, is he is very consistent. He is very consistent. And we need to remember that too. And he's very consistent in the blessings as well as the consequences as well. So he recalls it. He says, I recount the steadfast love of the Lord. Now this is now kind of Israel speaking and reflecting now. So now we had that encounter with the Lord coming. Now he says, I recount the steadfast love of the Lord, the praises of the Lord, according to all that the Lord has granted us, and the great goodness to the house of Israel, that he has granted them according to his compassion, according to the abundance of his steadfast love. For he said, surely they are my people, children who will not deal falsely, and he became their Savior. In all their affliction, he was afflicted, and the angel of his presence saved them. In his love, in his pity, he redeemed them up and carried them the days of old. So he starts out by remembering the history, right? And one of the things about his history is about his mercy. And that's something that we as Christians need to remember. Everything about God. Everybody, they have God as either a God of love of the New Testament or a God of hate and war of the Old Testament. It's like, what about the mercy that God has steadfastly demonstrated? Mercy first. If God didn't have mercy, the very first sin that was committed, he'd have just blown the place up, burned it down, right? I've always thought about that. I thought, he could have easily just took his thumb and smushed us out and said, let's start this again. Let's just create it. Let's try that. Let's hit the reset button and smudge us out and rebuild and say, okay, let's try that again. But that's not God. That's not what God's about. God is about love. God is about free will, about allowing us to choose to love him, just like we want our children to choose to love us. You can try and force them all day long, but there's such a sweet love that comes to us when it's chosen by the person that's loving you, right? And that's why mercy is then given. And that's what started out was because of love to mankind, that because also his mercy, he then displayed towards us and allowing us. Yeah, he said we're going to die, we're not going to live forever, we're going to live with consequences. But his mercy allowed a plan too, didn't it? A mercy then provided a scheme of redemption that he played out throughout history. And so, that's what we need to remember, and that's what he is doing here. Isaiah is remembering that history, though. It shows a lot of mercy, how he redeemed, how he lifted us up, and how he carried them. Sometimes we have to look at our own history to remember that as well. And you hear me talk about this a lot I call it the faith of a rearview mirror. Too often we can look in the rearview mirror of our lives and see, oh, look at all the wonderful things that the Lord has done. Look at all this, look at that. But when we look forward, as we're going forward in life, we seem to forget about it. And then we either wallow in our pity, or we continue to make the mistakes, or we wonder why we're doing what we're doing or what's happening around us, but we forget about the history of what God has done for us. And He is consistent, which means He's going to do the same He's done in the past for you, He's going to do in the future and forever. So this present trouble cannot erase His care for us. I mean, think about it. There are so many things that are still so beautiful about this world that even the evil get to enjoy. The evil people, get to enjoy the beautiful sunrises. They get to see the creative order of things. They get to enjoy life. They abuse it, but you know what? They still are enjoying blessings that are coming from the Father. And you get more specific than about us, is that, you know what? It doesn't erase His care for us and what He's doing for us. Because even in our rottenest times, when we're in sin, He is providing a way to care for us, isn't He? And it's through the blood of Christ. And it's always there for us as Christians as well. That even though we inflict ourselves with sin and we inflict ourselves with the consequences of those sins, He provides care and it's there ready for us. And then He says, but, I love that, always dropping that in verse 10, but they rebelled and grieved His Holy Spirit. Therefore He turned to be their enemy, and He Himself fought against them. Kind of that third person. Who's He fighting against? He's fighting against them, His own children. That's the hardest thing to do as a parent, isn't it? If you've raised any children, one of the hardest things to do is to stand down your child and get in their face and have to discipline them, and what you're doing to them is hurting them, whether it's physically giving them the belt occasionally, or taking things away from them, or separating away from them for a while because of their rebellion. It's the worst thing in the world. But you know what's worse? Compromising it. And allowing that to be compromised, because does that child learn anything? If you don't have consequences and you have to live through consequences of bad decisions, then you don't learn anything. Just like, okay, walk over there. Okay, I want to volunteer. Somebody walk over there. There's a light switch, plug in. Stick your finger in it. Anybody going to go do it? Oh, there would be one, wouldn't there? Why would you not do it? Because you probably have been shocked at some point, and the consequences are not good, and so you're not going to do it. But a child, don't say that with a bunch of kids in the room. They'd jump up and run right over there. There's this old short video. I remember this father sitting there watching a child, and he's got a fork in his hand. He's walking up to a plug-in, and his mom goes, hey, hey, and the father goes, shh, wait. And you see the lights kind of dim. Not going to do that again, are you? The mom's like, no. And the dad's like, no, let him do it. No, wait. You have to suffer the consequences sometimes to understand how wonderful it is that we have. And so they rebelled. They grieved Him. They grieved His Spirit. So, just because you have that relationship as a child, parent and child, doesn't give you certain privileges that everyone else. No, you don't. And that's what he kind of draws out in this section here. This blessing, though, did not remove the responsibility that they had in their covenant faithfulness they should have been maintaining. And so God's people must respond with obedience. And that's something that we see that they're failing to do. So let's read verse 11. Then he remembered the days of old, of Moses and his people. Where is he who brought them up out of the sea with the shepherds of his flock? Where is he who put them in the midst of his Holy Spirit, who caused his glorious arm to go at the right hand of Moses, who divided the waters before them to make himself an everlasting name, who led them through the depths like a horse in the desert? They did not stumble. like livestock that go down into the valley. The Spirit of the Lord gave them rest. So you led your people to make for yourself a glorious name. Remember the God of Exodus. That's what he's saying. What happened? He took them out of bondage. Took them out of bondage of the Egyptians. He divided the waters. He brought them through. He fed them. He provided for them. He led them. He delivered them into the land as he had promised. He had protected them from their enemies. All these things he's remembering. And it's almost as if the person, like I was saying, having a conversation with himself, where is that God? It's like, we remember what he did before. Where's he now? And I would just ask, so what changed? Why is he not guiding you no more? Why is he not protecting you no more? You know, something changed, right? If you're not getting that protection, and we can go back and we can study the book of Judges and see real quickly how fast that they would be in a relationship, faithful to God, being blessed, and they would start drifting away, right? And what did God do? That God of Exodus that had protected them, delivered them, and all these blessings was gone. And he pulled them back, as he had promised in the law, right? You obey me, here's the blessings. You disobey me, here's what I'm going to do against you. And all those things they did against them, it reached a certain point in that judge cycle, you know, that cycle where they would finally get to the rock bottom and they'd go, Lord, save us. Before they'd finally realize it. This is almost that moment where they're calling out and say, where's that God of Moses? Where's that God of the Exodus? You know, where's he at? You know. And again, he's also showing that they couldn't do the delivering. They didn't bring themselves out of Egypt. You did not bring yourself out of sin. It was Jesus Christ and his sacrifice that brought them. His Spirit led them. His Spirit gave them that rest. His past faithfulness supports prayer. So let's read 15. We have a shift. Now we have a shift, and he's also, look down from heaven and see, from your holy, beautiful habitation, where are your zeal and your might? Stirring of your inner parts and your compassion are held back from me. This is a complaint, okay? This is like reflecting on the sinful condition and the consequences that they're having to go through, and now the prayer. And this is actually going to go into chapter 64. But he says, you know, this idea of look down and see, look at me. You know, where's that zeal and your might that you used to have for me? The stirring of your inner parts, your compassion are held back from me. For you are our Father. See that privilege? You are our Father. Though Abraham does not know us and Israel does not acknowledge us, you, O Lord, are our Father, our Redeemer. From old is your name. It's kind of interesting how he says, well, Abraham doesn't know us and Israel doesn't acknowledge us. What does he mean by that? Well, there's the genealogical side of it that they never met Abraham. We're coming back to the world and how your relatives and how this association of people, you know, Abraham doesn't know us. He doesn't know us. He can't help us. What is going on? And Israel doesn't accept us. And that was who? Jacob. So, but you are one that is consistent among all of that names. The Lord is the one that's there. And that's why he says, Redeemer from old, from all the way back is your name. So the Father and Redeemer, they call him his Father. They're in a point, again, receiving the consequences of their sins. And so Babylon's going to be coming on them. They're going to go off into captivity. And this distress, though, is, you know, honestly before God. They bring that distress and they're crying out. They're calling back, saying, help us out, you know, and they recall their own history. And so depend on him and not just your ancestry. It's kind of ironic because the Jews tended to lean on that real hard, didn't they? Thinking that somehow just because they were the descendants of Abraham, that they were justified in whatever they did. And thinking that, and even today, right? And so in this, we see this ask for compassion and asking for his help is what he's saying. 17. O Lord, why do you make us wander from your ways and harden our heart so that we fear you not? Return for the sake of your servants, the tribes of your heritage. You know, it sounds like he's blaming, right? You know, when you look at that, it's kind of like, you know, why have you done this? Doesn't, you know, I tell you what, I think I heard my boys say that a lot. Why are you doing this to me? Why? You know, why are you doing this to me? Why do you make us wander from your ways and harden our hearts? Knock, knock, hello. What changed, right? Why are you where you're at? You need to stop and think about it. And you know, that's sometimes that's like children. Until you take stuff away, until you put them in the consequences of their behavior, they will keep going forward. And then you take it away and they're like, whoa, wait a minute. Whoa, what's going on? Why'd you do that to me? No. You got it backwards. You did it to yourself. You know, this idea that, you know, no. You wandered from me. You are the one hardening your hearts. It's not me, God, but they're asking, return for the sake of your servants. So this hardening of heart, we have that a lot. That's another phrase that's used that is, it's really pretty clear. Hardening is sinfulness. You know, I mean, it's a way of hardening away from being able to listen and comprehend and obey because of our own personal choices that we've done. Their rebellion remains their responsibility. You know, that's what is going on. And so now, then they plead for God to return, which is kind of interesting, isn't it? Going on 18. Your holy people held possession for a little while. Our adversaries have trampled down your sanctuary. We have become like those whom you have never ruled, like those who are not called by your name. You know, it sounds like they're just crying about something that they have inflicted on themselves. You know, your holy people held a possession for a little while. This is talking about the temple. You know, they held it and then it was burnt to the ground. And that place was very significant because it's a place that Jehovah resided. It's a place where it demonstrated that they were in a covenant relationship with him. And so, you know, one of the things is remember his mercy again, and you got to turn from your rebellion. That's what it's kind of bringing out, and trust in his power, you know, to seek those who are trying to find his help. This idea where he says, we have become like those whom you've never ruled. In other words, they had a special covenant relationship in which they were subjected to. And so he was their king. And they feel that, oh, look, we're as if we're just any other Gentile people. Like I said, chapter 64 will continue this. It just seems like it abruptly stops, but it's going to continue this thought. So I hope you enjoyed the lesson. It's kind of fast and furious, but I hope that if you enjoyed it, let us know. I have the handouts in the back if you want to pick up one of those. Next week we'll hit chapter 64. If you're here this afternoon and there's something we can do to help you in your relationship with Jesus Christ, I hope you'll let us know. And if you're comfortable, let us know while we stand and sing.